Today's scripture reading is taken from Mark 3, verses 13 through 19. Jesus went up onto a mountainside and called to him those he wanted, and they came to him. He appointed 12 that they may be with him, and that he might send them out to preach and to have authority to drive out demons. These are the 12 he appointed: Simon, to whom he gave the name Peter; James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John. To them he gave the name Boanerges, which means son of thunder; Andrew, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthew, Thomas, James, son of Alphaeus, Thaddeus, Simon the Zealot, and Judas Iscariot, who betrayed him. This is the gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ.
I'll pray one more time here. We'll jump in here. Heavenly Father, again, thank you for the grace of gathering, and also, as Hal mentioned, all the ways that you're with us, mindful of the sacrifices, people laying down their lives for others without a thought for themselves. And what a picture that is of life in faith. To the first would go last. The greatest would be the servant of all. And so, Lord, as we look into the scriptures, we expect that you are also looking into us and exposing areas of our hearts we withhold, parts of our mind that we try to keep from you, and the way that we live our lives that is not yet fully surrendered. And we trust that you're at work there, pulling us closer, making us more like you. Amen. So it is the anniversary of 9/11, of course, 21 years. It is also, this summer was an important anniversary in sports history. This summer marked 30 years since the first Dream Team. Who remembers the first Dream Team, 1992 Summer Olympics? Like 2 hands go up, but don't worry, I'll catch you up. That year, 1992, was the first time in the Summer Olympics that they let NBA players play in the basketball events. And so that year, the Americans put together a team unlike any basketball team the world has ever seen. Even if you're not into basketball, you don't remember that happened. That team that year, you'll remember some of the names. Michael Jordan, of course, was the superstar of the team, but he also played alongside Magic Johnson and Larry Bird and Clyde Drexler and Karl Malone. They were all on that team. Scottie Pippen was on that team. Guys that were superstars that changed the way the game was played, all played together. And no other country on earth had ever put together a team like that. No NBA team had ever put together a team like that. And they had one clear mission: bring home the gold medal. And they did it. They obliterated the competition. On average, they outscored the teams they played 120-80. And with basically barely even trying, they crushed everyone they faced. It was really a masterclass in basketball team. And every Olympics team that came after, especially the American one, they would be compared to that team, that year, the 92 basketball team. That was the dream team, and the best that's ever been. And when they put together that team, they applied the 2 most basic team building principles that you must follow if you want to build a winning team. And the first one is just what you see on the screen there: pick the best. You want to build the best team, then you recruit, you hire, you train, you select the very best available to you. That's one key to winning. And the second one is to then position for maximum impact. Put each player, each team member, whoever they are, in the place where they will contribute their very best to your mission. I mean, there were guys on the 92 Dream Team. They were superstars on their team in the NBA back home. But that year, they willingly took bench positions, second, third line, to be the supporting cast because they were so committed to the mission of winning, no matter what it took. And that's what you need to do in every team you're building. Put people where they will contribute their very best to your team's very best. Doesn't matter what kind of team you're building. If it's a sports team, at church, at work, a chess team, a debate team, whatever. Pick the best, position them for maximum impact. If you want to win, that's what you do. And of course, then the reverse is also true. If you don't care about winning, if you don't care if you lose, then totally disregard those. Just pick whoever you feel like. Do whatever you want. And that would make sense, right? Right. Except, we're going to look at a moment in history when a new team is being formed to push into the most important mission in all of human history. This is the starting lineup for the most important mission that humanity's ever been a part of, the mission to overcome sin and death, to see light and life and hope restored to every corner of creation. And Jesus is building the team that will take his mission into the future, the team that will take it to the next generation, hand it off to the next generation, who will hand it off to the next generation successively up until today, 2,000 years. And if they win, if this team wins at this mission, it changes everything everywhere forever. It changes the course of human history. But if they fail, death wins. All hope is lost. Everything, hope of humanity, is riding on what Jesus is doing here with these people. And so we ask, how does Jesus build this team? Does he pick the best? Does he position them for maximum impact? And it is important to know this because the pattern that Jesus establishes here with these guys is the pattern that gets replicated in every generation after. It's how they pick their team members, the guys they journey with, the people they journey, the men and women they go forward with. It's what happens in the next generation and the next generation. It is the pattern that is at work that has brought you to the very chair you're in, hearing these words spoken. It is the pattern that is at work that has called you into this mission. Whether you've answered the call or not, that's what's at work in your life. And so we just heard this pattern established. Jesus goes up on a mountainside and he says these words. It said that Mark wrote these words. He called to himself those he wanted. These are his first choice. These are the guys he wants to do this with, the ones he wants. And we heard the names. Simon, he renames Peter. Then there's some brothers, James and John, the sons of thunder. And then there's Andrew and Philip and Bartholomew and Matthew and Thomas. And there's a different James. And there's Thaddeus. And there's a different Simon. He's called the Zealot. And of course, Judas Iscariot, the betrayer. These are the guys. And so over the years of his ministry, that Jesus is going around preaching and performing miracles, doing all these great things, he's got crowds of disciples that gather everywhere he goes. Tons of people that want to hear him, and then circles within that, the people that would follow him, his disciples. But these are the guys, these 12, these are the starting lineup. And they join his team by him giving each and every one of them the exact same command. Tells them these words, follow me. He doesn't have a Facebook page to like. He doesn't have a YouTube channel to subscribe to, or an Instagram to follow, or a podcast to listen to. He says, follow me. It's intimate, it is personal, it is about life together. The command is just to go where he goes, do what he does, hear the words he has to say, see him do the things that he does, because Jesus is saying, follow me. I think you can do this too. I think you can say this. I think I'm giving you authority to preach, to drive out demons, just everything you've seen me doing. This is what I want you to do. Love God like I love God. Love people the way I love people. And these 3 years, this is how he trains these 12 guys. This is basically an unending team practice for 3 years. They go wherever he goes. Whenever he prays, they pray. Whenever he talks, they listen. And whatever he says to do, they do that. They are there more than anyone else to hear all the sermons, see all the miracles, witness the way he talks to the marginalized, the poor, the powerful, the ones in authority. To see his strength and his compassion and this determination that like nothing can stop him. This unending flowing mercy that he gives away to anyone that wants it. They are being formed when they follow him to be like that, to do that, to preach like that. And they are called to take that work and carry it forward throughout all the world, all time, all history, to see everything everywhere change for everyone forever. Now remember the two principles to building a winning team. Pick the best, position for maximum impact. How do these guys measure up? When Jesus puts together this team, he calls those he wanted. How do they measure up? We'll look at a handful of them, and you can decide if you would pick them for your team. And first, we'll look at Peter. And you always got to look at Peter first, because Peter is first on every list of the disciples. Every time the disciples are listed off, Peter's name is always first. It's kind of like after Jesus, Peter is the next guy in charge. He's the 2IC. After Jesus, he's the one in charge of the rest of the team. But the question then you'd ask is Peter the best? Did Jesus pick to lead his team? Did he pick the best guy? Now, when we first met him, you heard what his name was. At first, his name is Simon, and then Jesus gives him a new name, Peter. And in the ancient world, your name was your identity. It is how everybody is to see you and know you and recognize you. Just say your name, and that's who you are. And Peter means the rock, the unflappable, immovable one, solid, dependable. It's kind of like Dwayne Johnson. He's the rock. He's the big sturdy guy that nobody can take on. Or Rocky Balboa, the boxer. That's the idea with Peter, that no matter what, you can count on this dude. But does he live up to his name? See, often, more than acting like a rock, you think he's as dense as a rock. One commentator says that instead of the rock, his name should have been the Rockhead. He's bold, he's outspoken, he's impulsive, he's overconfident, but he's also often wrong. Rocky is a little too cocky. There's this one time in Mark chapter 8, this is one of the famous times. Jesus has been, it's a few chapters after this, Jesus has been preaching, the crowds are gathering, people are talking about him. Word is getting around about Jesus. Who is this guy? And some people think he's some kind of prophet. It's been sent by God. Other people think he's basically like a snake oil salesman. He's a fraud. All the religious leaders are really suspicious of him. But Jesus pulls these 12 guys aside and he talks to them. He says, but you've heard who they think I am. But you've seen me. You've been with me. Everywhere I go, you go. Who do you think I am? And again, Peter goes first. Peter's the one to speak. And he says, you are the Messiah. You are the Son of God. And Jesus says, way to go, Peter. You got it. Finally, you got something right. Heaven revealed this to you, and you heard it. Well done. And he knows Peter is leading the way and seeing Jesus is the hero from heaven, come to save the world. Peter sees it. But the very next scene, things flip around completely, because Jesus starts to talk about what it means for him to be the Messiah. It means he is headed to Jerusalem, where he will be betrayed and arrested and tortured and killed. And Peter doesn't like that. Peter wants his Messiah to be a champion. So Peter drags him aside and tries to shake him and say, Jesus, you're mistaken. You're wrong. You got to be large and in charge, buddy. Come on. There's a throne waiting for you, not torture and death. And this is when Jesus, instead of calling him Peter, he says, get behind me, Satan. First, Peter hears directly from heaven, and now he's speaking Satan's words. Peter is trying to rebuke Jesus. Can you imagine trying to set God straight? God, I think you're mistaken. Let me tell you how it really is. Is that the guy you would pick to lead your team? The most famous time Peter gets it wrong is also the most tragic. Jesus gets these 12 guys together for one last meal. And sorrow is weighing heavy on him. And he tells them, all of you will fall away tonight. Every one of you is going to abandon me. Entire starting lineup. But again, Peter goes first, and he jumps out and says, boldly, loudly, even if every one of these losers falls away from you, Jesus, not me. I would never do that. Once again, Peter thinks he knows better than Jesus. And then once again, Jesus corrects him and says, Peter, actually, you're you're going to be the worst of all. You're going to disown me 3 times. And then Peter makes this vow. He says, Jesus, you're wrong. Even if I have to die with you, I would never disown you. And then we see who's right. Jesus is arrested and led away. And sure enough, 3 times, Peter is asked if he is with Jesus. And 3 times, Peter says, no, I don't know the man. And the last time, the 3rd time he's asked, it's just actually a little servant girl that says, hey, aren't you with him? And he says, you don't know what you're talking about. How is that for a solid rock? Immovable, unflappable. In the time that it matters most, Peter can't find the courage to fulfill his vow. Even if I have to die with you, I would never disown you. Is that the kind of guy you would pick to be the head of your team? Someone who's too impulsive, speaks before he thinks, someone who can't keep his word, someone who can't live up to his name. Would you pick him? Next on the list is the first of 2 sets of brothers, John and his brother James. Jesus had 2 sets of brothers there. Peter and his brother Andrew is part of these guys, and then also James and John, the sons of thunder. I don't know what was going through Jesus' mind when he put all this together, because I know what it's like to work with brothers, and I don't know why you would put 2 sets of brothers together like this. I ran my own business for years, and at different times I had my 4 brothers all working for me. And 3 of them are older, 1 of them are younger. And on one hand, it was a lot of fun, because for a few years with different brothers, we spent a lot of time together. And we, at a different stage of life, we got to know each other really well. But of course, there are other times where the pressure was up, and do you think my older brothers enjoyed having me boss them around on a job site? There could often be a lot of tension between us, a lot of quiet rides home together. And this is just the way it is with brothers sometimes. There's this little guy, Johnny, and one day his mom and dad brought home a new brother from the hospital. And as soon as the baby got home, the baby started crying, and mommy fed the baby, and then after he ate, he started crying again, and then mommy changed the baby, and then he started crying again, and mommy put him down for a nap, and then he started crying again when he woke up. And for days, it just seemed like all that happened in his house, Johnny just heard baby crying and screaming. And finally he went to Mom and asked, Mom, where did the baby come from? She said, Johnny, he came from heaven. And Johnny said, oh, I can see why they threw him out. That's life with brothers. And Jesus picks 2 sets, Peter and Andrew and James and John, and puts them together. Follow me, intense journey together over 3 years. These guys, James and John, they're the sons of thunder, which sounds more like a wrestling tag team than preachers to me. But the idea here is, in the ancient world, thunder was a common theme in religions, these ancient religions. Zeus, he was the god who could throw lightning bolts and the thunder would explode. Or there's another one, an ancient god. He's not just an ancient god, he's also a superhero. He's in all the Marvel movies. Who's that guy? He's a son of thunder. Thor is the son of thunder. He wields the hammer, and when he smashes it, thunder rolls and he destroys everything. That's Thor's power, and that's kind of what James and John are supposed to be like here. They think they have this incredible power. There's this one scene in Luke 9 where the disciples show up to this Samaritan town to preach, and the Samaritans, they don't really like the Jews, so they reject Jesus, they reject them and send them away. And they turn away to leave, and James and John pull Jesus aside, and they say, kind of like this Thor kind of moment, they say, hey, Jesus, do you think we should bring fire down from heaven and just burn the whole place up and destroy everything and everyone? That would probably be a good idea right now, right? Now, if you remember, what is the mission that Jesus is calling these guys into? To defeat death and sin and destruction and bring life and light everywhere. And these guys, again, they're the guys that have been with Jesus more than anybody else. And the first impulse they have is, hey, why don't we set the whole place on fire with heavenly fire and just kill them all? That'd be a good idea, right? Would you pick these guys for your team? Is that who you would choose after all that time together? And how could they miss it? A little further down the list is Thomas. And of course, when I mention Thomas, how does everybody know Thomas? Doubting Thomas. Everybody knows that. Thomas is remembered as the disciple with no faith. I'm not sure it's fair, but that's how we think of him. And Thomas, he only speaks 4 times in all the Gospels, and the last time at the end of John is kind of the most famous one, where he says, "Unless I get to put my hand in the wounds, I refuse to believe that this is Jesus resurrected from the dead. I just can't believe it." Now we remember that, but mostly what we don't notice is the miracle that Thomas was even included at all. Do you know what the name Thomas means? It means the twin. Now, and remember, like I said with Peter getting his name changed, your name in the ancient world, it was your identity. It's who you were. And what does this mean for Thomas? See, these days, when someone has twins, we think of it as, twice the blessing. I look at it as a father, and I just see twice the work. But I got 2 cousins that each have a set of twins, and it makes for great Instagram posts and so on. But I'm not sure. I think God probably spared me of this. These days, the blessing that's twice as nice. Back in the ancient world, it was not thought of as a blessing. Twins were thought of as a curse. Back then, and really even just until a couple hundred years ago, childbirth was one of the most dangerous medical events somebody might go through. Up to 40% of kids would die while being born. And a very high chance also that the mother might die. And if you found out you were pregnant with twins, if you were having twins, that means the likelihood of complexity, the likelihood of something going wrong doubled for you. Meant mom might not survive. And so twins were not at all a blessing. They're more of a curse. And so often what happened, if you had twins, they didn't always even keep them. They would take the secondborn, you'd keep the firstborn and take the second. Often they would just let it die by exposure. It means they would take it out to the woods or a garbage dump and just leave it there, leave it to fate. And the weather or the animals would solve your curse for you. But if they did keep it, they didn't often even give the baby a name. So you know what they called it? The twin, Thomas. No name, nobody, the unwanted one, the reject, the curse that we really don't even want to keep hanging around. This is like, if you remember back in grade school at recess and you're playing some game at recess and you pick the captains and the captains pick the teams, and there's always that one kid that gets picked last, the one nobody wants but somebody eventually gets stuck with. That's Thomas. But not just at recess, it's his whole life. That's who he is. The twin, the nobody, the unwanted one. So if you were going to put together your team for the most important mission in all of human history, would you pick the reject for your starting lineup? Is that who you would go after? Thomas, the no-name, is the one Jesus calls, the one Jesus wanted. Let's go race through a couple more of these guys that Jesus chose. Then there's one that we hear about, the other Simon the Zealot he's called. We don't know anything about Simon as a guy, what he's like, his personality, anything, except we just know he's a zealot. And the zealots back then, they were basically a radicalized young Middle Eastern men. This is not a new problem of the internet today. This was happening back then also. This is the Romans had conquered Israel. They had come in, invaded the Holy Land, taken over. And the zealots were guys that made a vow to each other, to Israel, and to God that they would conquer the Romans at any cost. They were often violent. They were often extreme. They would explode into a killing at any moment, basically an insurrection. You never knew it was going to happen, but they would go after anybody connected to Rome, a politician, or especially a soldier, the guys, the occupying forces in their towns with the weapons. Anything they could do to make a dent in Rome's strength over them. Hated everyone connected with Rome, especially not just the Romans, but especially tax collectors. Tax collectors were locals. In this case, they were Jews who had a contract with Rome. They would collect outrageous amounts of taxes. that they would take the fruits of the Holy Land, the fruits of the labors of the people in the Holy Land, and send them off to Caesar in Rome, which Caesar would then use to fund the forces that are occupying the Holy Land. And so they viewed tax collectors as traitors worse than any other kind. They basically believed it was an unforgivable sin. And the zealots vowed to do whatever they needed to get rid of them. Simon was a zealot. Is this the kind of person you would choose for a mission to bring peace to all the earth? And then there's the next guy that Jesus chooses. The next member of the dream team is Matthew the tax collector. On purpose, Jesus seems to pick these two guys. Now remember our first rules of team building. Pick the very best, position for maximum impact. And an important part of that is chemistry. You want to know that your team members can work together in the same direction toward the same goals. So if you were putting together a team, would you pick two guys that are guaranteed to have conflict with each other, that might even turn deadly? Would you pick these guys? This isn't just liberal and conservative. For some reason, Jesus wants people that are completely different from each other, completely opposed to each other, and puts them together. I bet he said, hey, Simon and Matthew, you guys, you're bunking together. You guys you guys are sleeping together in the same room. You'll work it out. I know you will. Would you do that? The question is, why would Jesus do this? He is building his dream team, and he completely ignores the first, most basic principle of building a winning team. And not only does he do that with Simon and with Matthew, he also calls Judas. For some reason, he wants Judas. Judas is the guy that for a long time he'll go along with everything Jesus says. And then he'll start to question Jesus. He'll start to question what Jesus is really up to, who Jesus really is. He'll start stealing money. He will be the one that negotiates to betray Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. 3 years, he walks from town to town with Jesus. He hears the same sermons that Peter and James and John hears. He sees all the same miracles. Witnesses everything, and still something in his heart turns against Jesus. And still, Jesus knows this, and Jesus wants him. In fact, on the night of the Last Supper, where he gathers these guys together, Jesus wraps a towel around his waist, grabs a bowl full of water, and he gets in front of Judas. This is the job of a slave. And he says, Judas, even now I want to wash you clean. I know what you're up to. But even now, here's my body. Here's my blood for you, Judas. Why would he do this? And he doesn't stop there. You see, the world's greatest missionary, Jesus himself, encounters on the road to Damascus, Paul, and says, Paul, then he's Saul, I want you to join the team too. And then up to that point, all we know about Saul is that he is rounding up Christians to jail them and kill them. And he will become the greatest missionary the world has ever seen. There are still churches around today that were started by the Apostle Paul almost 2,000 years ago. Why would Jesus do it? Why, when he's building the most important team for the most important mission in all of history, would he apply this strategy? Because remember, what he does here is the pattern that keeps getting replicated in every generation after. Every generation after. It's what brought you here today. For some reason, he doesn't choose the people that are the most powerful or the best looking or the smartest or the most talented. I am the exception to this rule. For some reason, over and over and over again, he chooses the simple and the humble and the plain. The rejects that nobody wants. Even the proud and the selfish and the arrogant. He picks the failures and the liars and the cowards, the murderers, even the sworn enemies. That's who he keeps calling over and over and over again. It's these people, the most ordinary people, that he chooses for the most extraordinary mission. And why does he do this? Good job. I think it's because if he can do that with them, what could he do with you? Because Peter, the guy who fails Jesus when Jesus needs him most, Peter will be the guy that fearlessly brings the gospel to Rome. He will preach faithfully until Caesar also has him nailed to a cross, only upside down, because Peter didn't think he was worthy of dying the way Jesus died. Peter, forever after, is now known as the apostle of hope, not the coward, not the failure. John, the disciple who wanted to rain fire down from heaven and destroy a whole village. John lives to be a very old man. He writes a whole bunch of letters. He writes one of the Gospels in the New Testament. And all his writings have this same thread that's woven through them, the same theme that's there that gets repeated over and over again. These words, love one another. As he has loved us, so you should love each other. Love one another. The guy who wanted to rain fire down from heaven is now known as the apostle of love. Even Thomas, the no-name disciple, it's believed that after the resurrection, Thomas is the one who brought the gospel into India. And there are still Christians in India, especially the southern areas, that trace their faith back to Thomas, bringing the gospel there. And in fact, like me, you probably know some Indian people that have very un-Indian last names. Last names like Thomas or Jameson, which means the son of James, who was one of the disciples. And they have those names, it's believed, because Thomas brought them with him when he brought the gospel into India. And so the question is, how is it that a man who was born with no name, with no legacy, with no birthright, for thousands of years, people pick their names after him? How does that happen? And Matthew, the one who rejects the Jewish people, who rejects his faith so that he can make it rich as a tax collector, Matthew will write one of the Gospels. Matthew is the one who kept Rome's books, will go on to write a book that is part of the bestseller in all of human history. Matthew. How does this happen? Even Judas, there's kind of like an urban legend in church history. It's not in the Bible, but the story is that when Jesus dies on the cross and he descends into hell, that while he's there, he is setting captives free. He is releasing people from hell to return them to life. And the legend is that while he's down there, he went looking for Judas. Even then, he did not want to let Judas escape his grace, that even then, his love just would not give up on Judas. Now, it's not in the Bible, but I think that's something Jesus would do. But why would he do this? Why would he love people like this? Why would he do any of this? And here's the thing. Is that the greatness of Jesus' team is not defined by the greatness of his team members. It is defined by his greatness in us, with us, at work through us. Because everything that Jesus will do, everything the church will accomplish in all this mission to conquer death and sin, it has nothing to do with how great any of us are. Instead, it is him, his love, his great love for all of us, his great faithfulness for each and every one of us, that even when we betray him, even when we fall away from him, he just is relentless in going after us and finding us. He will call to himself those he wants, and he will not give up on us. His promise is to be with us through it all. He is the great coach, the great team captain, and the greatest player, and we just so often really we're just along for the ride with him, and that we can be a part of great things in this great world because of his greatness in us, giving us strength. There's a little story in Acts chapter 4. It describes this perfectly. After the resurrection, after Jesus has gone back to heaven, Peter and John are together and they're in Jerusalem preaching the gospel. And they're speaking in front of the religious leaders. These are the same guys that had Jesus persecuted and killed. And in 4:13 in Acts it says, when they saw the courage of Peter and John and realized that they were unschooled, ordinary men, they were astonished. And they took note that these men had been with Jesus. See, the Greek word in that passage for the word ordinary is this word idiotes. And I'll give you one guess what English word we get from that word. What we're saying here is that these guys are a couple of idiots. Unschooled. They are not that bright. And yet, even these guys who are against Jesus can tell by their words, by their courage, by their passion, oh, they've been with Jesus. It's all over them. That was the source of their greatness, not their schooling, not their position. These are the guys that will change the course of human history. And so this means that if you feel like you don't belong on the team, if you feel like you would never make the starting lineup, if you feel like you are not good enough, like you were a reject or some kind of loser, the good news for all of us is that the kingdom of idiots has a door over the gates, has a sign over the door at the gates that says, welcome everyone. Welcome all of you. Welcome all the left behind and the forgotten and the unwanted. I want you. Come on in. Follow me. The world will know. The world will see it in you. It's his greatness with us, not our greatness. I heard this story about another kind of urban legend about this Polish pianist, Petrowski. And like 100 years ago, before there were radios and recordings and so on, Petrowski was one of like a rock star. People lined up to see him wherever he performed. And so there's this story, who knows how much of it's true, but it goes that one night, while the stage is set and this grand piano is waiting for Petrowski to come out and begin playing, the crowd is holding their breath in anticipation. A little boy sneaks up on stage and sits down at that piano and starts to play chopsticks. And at first the crowd is horrified. Who let this little boy go up and play on the maestro's piano? But then Petrowski, he's in the wings and he sees what's happening and he comes out and he sits down beside that boy and he wraps his big long arms on either side of the boy with his big hands. He starts to improvise a composition, a masterpiece in the moment, along with this boy's chopsticks. And as he's playing, he leans over and he whispers in the boy's ear and he says, just keep going. Don't stop. Just keep playing. You've got this. We're going to do this together. You just keep playing. And that night, the crowd heard all the great works by all the great composers. They saw one of the finest in the world excel at his craft. But when they went home that night, what song did they talk about? But the one of the maestro sitting alongside a little boy, letting both of their greatness shine together. A masterpiece alongside the boy's chopsticks. This is our life in Christ. Unschooled, ordinary people, living out a masterpiece, not because of your greatness, but because of the greatness of the composer who's at work in you and through you. Does he pick the best? Not by a long shot. He picks the ones he wants. I get the band to come up. Don, you can round everybody up. Jesus has totally disregarded the first, most basic principle of effective team building. Pick the best. But he has applied perfectly, masterfully the second one, positioning for maximum impact. God has put you right where he wants you in this time, in this place, to do exactly what it is he wants you to do. He has positioned you for maximum impact. Believe it or not, whether it feels like it or not, you are right where you need to be to do exactly what it is God wants you to do. He knows exactly what he's doing. That's the way it was for Peter and John and James and for Matthew and for Simon and you. You were born in the right time, in the right place, in the right family, doing the right kinds of things to be faithful to God. And so your simple faithfulness, right where you're at, can change the course of someone's life forever. You can do this. You are called to be a part of this. He wants you to do this. You can join the team. You can show up. You can be a part of things. A few years ago, in July 2018, I had a picture here of a beach in Florida. That day, a family, cousins and aunts and uncles and so on, they went to the beach together. And partway through the day, a mother looked around for her sons, her 3 sons, and she couldn't see them. But suddenly she heard them screaming. And they're out in the distance a little ways, caught up in an undercurrent and holding on to each other for dear life. And the mother started to swim out towards them, but the rest of the family members came around her and grabbed her and held her back and said, "You cannot go out there, you will go under too." But this is a mother, and she would not give up on her sons. So she took off after them, and 5 other family members went with her. And soon there were 9 family members out in this current, holding on to each other, being sucked under. They were going to die. And then a husband and wife heard them screaming. And the wife started to paddle towards them on a little paddle board. And the husband ran onto the shore and started pulling people together. And the people who could swim better, they went out into the water deeper. And the people who couldn't swim as well, they stayed on the shore. And they linked together into an 80-person chain that reached from the shores out to the people who were drowning in the water. And they grabbed them and they saved each and every person. They were able to pass them back along to safety because of the strength they had locked together as a human chain. 9 lives were saved that day. 9 funerals didn't happen. 9 different family members were not lost or grieved over. This is a picture of the church. The right place at the right time to do exactly what it is God is calling you to do, to save lives for all of eternity. He wants you. He wants you to be a part of this. You are positioned to be a part of something that will see people live forever. The course of history changed for people. Just the way you are. Not as you wish you were, not as you wish you could be, but you are being called just like this to take your place. This human chain, to find your place in this. The mission to defeat death and darkness, it will be accomplished. Not by your greatness, not by my greatness. It is by the greatness of the Master in each and every single one of us, by our side, connecting us together, our strength together, the team that He's putting together. Your life is not random. Your life is not an accident. You are where you are supposed to be in this moment, that He is calling you to be with Him because He wants you. To make your life a masterpiece, a wonderful composition by the maestro.